Hello, and good morning to all joining us via Zoom and our Facebook live stream. Welcome to the Center for Enlightenment's exploration of the spiritual teachings, Jewels from Jane Elizabeth. Each Sunday will be a free-flowing adventure with teachings by Jane Elizabeth Hart, facilitated by Certified Center for Enlightenment teachers. We are working from the self-study lesson found on our website at cfenlightenment.org. Today we're proceeding to the next self-study lesson titled Third Dimension, and our topic is moving out of the third dimension. Greg will be the facilitator for this lesson. Greg is a certified teacher for the Center for Enlightenment and longtime student of Jane Hart, studying with her for over 30 years. Jane is the author of Spiritual Power Tools, Support for Your Soul, master teacher, and founder of the Center for Enlightenment. Today's course will be live streamed via Facebook. A recording will be sent out with the weekly reflections so you can access it anytime. And for those new to this format, your chat icon is located at the bottom of your screen. Just click to view. If you have any technical questions, please reach out to the host or co-host via the chat. In addition to the Sunday courses, there will be a question and answer discussion on Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern. A link for these sessions will also be posted in the chat. If you're in need of prayer support, please contact us at cfenlightenment.org or just type centerforenlightenment.com. We are active on Facebook and X. Come check us out and share your thoughts, reflection, and experiences. It would also be a great support to like the postings that resonate with you. We also invite you to visit our website at cfenlightenment.org. There you will find additional self-study lessons, talks, videos, or you can search for specific topics to support your expansion in consciousness. So let's just sit back and take a deep breath as we begin today's journey with the prescription for spiritual alignment.
Hello and welcome. Let's take this journey out of the third dimension together and begin it by taking the prescription for spiritual alignment together. We are aligned with the presence of God within. We are protected by God's love, wisdom, knowledge, and grace. The God consciousness within helps us discover more about who we are. Thank you, God, for the gift of spiritual intuition. Thank you, God, for aligning our conscious, subconscious, and superconscious minds. We still our minds, release ourselves from the burdens of the lower self, and move into our higher consciousness, our higher awareness. Thank you. Thank you, God. Amen. Well, as we make this move into our higher awareness, what we're really doing is moving out of the third dimension and into the fourth dimensional consciousness. And all of the different tools and pictures and images that Jane has shared with us fit into this lesson today. We have the famous image of the spiritual thermometer, which is a depiction of your consciousness as you move from the third dimensional consciousness below a 5 into the fourth dimensional consciousness above a 5. That's another way of looking at this. The ego consciousness, the lower mind, the intellect, is below a 5. The intuition and the soul consciousness are above a 5. Your lower self, your higher self. Your third dimension, your fourth dimension. So this is one way to look at this third dimensional consciousness. Another one is depicted in the spiritual iceberg. And this whole iceberg is the third dimensional consciousness. Subconscious, beneath the surface, conscious above the surface, but all of it limited third dimensional human consciousness. Ego consciousness, if you will. But what about all this? The infinite ocean that stretches out forever, beyond forever, because it is infinite. This higher consciousness, this ocean, is the fourth dimensional consciousness. But before we can understand the fourth dimensional consciousness, many of us would just like to skip over everything, leapfrog the process, and just move into this fourth dimensional ocean of allness, oneness. We have to understand what we're dealing with here. We have to become fully conscious. Spiritual enlightenment is also called mastery. And mastery is mastering the iceberg. Mastery is mastering that which is below a 5 on the spiritual thermometer. Mastery is mastering the ego consciousness, the lower consciousness, the realm of cause and effect or karma, that third dimensional consciousness that exists in time, exists in the physical space of the world. And there's so many synonyms for the third dimensional consciousness. It sounds kind of scientific, maybe a little bit abstract to say third dimensional. But if you understand it as your ego, as your mind, as your lower self, as the realm of karma or cause and effect, you can understand that this is the lower part of your being. And then, of course, the question comes, it came to me, well, why did we have to do this? I mean, if we're supposed to move out of the third dimensional human consciousness, why were we given a human consciousness? Why were we given bodies? I mean, why didn't we just get zapped and move into some kind of spiritual fourth dimensional allness? It's because it's part of the plan for us to evolve. You are an evolving soul, a soul in evolution, and that's part of the plan. So we're not saying that the third dimensional consciousness is bad or terrible or wrong, that the ego, the mind, the lower self is some kind of terrible mistake. No. But if we stay stuck in it for too long, then it becomes a mistake because you have evolved to that point where you are moving out of this limited consciousness. You have evolved to this point where you are ready to move. You know, and I used to have house plans. I don't anymore. I'm just too lazy, but I used to be pretty good about it. And I noticed that they get to a certain point where they'd grow and they'd grow and they'd evolve and they'd evolve. And then they would start to suffer in some way because they were root bound. They were limited. The container was too small for the growth that they'd experienced. And we're very much like that root bound plant. You've reached that point. If you're watching this video, you've reached that point where you're root bound, where the third dimensional consciousness is hemming you in like that ceramic pot that just doesn't seem to fit anymore. And you got to repot yourself. This is a very imperfect analogy, but you've got to move out of this third dimensional limited container into the openness. And of course, when you're repotting a plant, you put it into a larger pot. But we're talking about moving into a larger consciousness. So you were moving from human consciousness, third dimensional consciousness, into soul consciousness, fourth dimensional consciousness. And you might say, well, what's wrong with being a human? Humanity is a good thing. I want to be fully human as well as fully divine. And that's true. But the human consciousness no longer serves you. If you look at a dog or a squirrel, there's nothing wrong with a dog or a squirrel, but would you want to have that consciousness? Would you want to be in that limited consciousness? How about an amoeba? I remember hearing a song back 50 years ago about being it. What was it like to be an amoeba? And if you need a friend, you just give a wiggle and split right down the middle. And when you look, when I look, there's two of me, both as handsome as can be. I mean, this was a humorous view of what it would be like to be in a very limited consciousness. Well, you're going to look back on this human consciousness, this third dimensional consciousness, with the same attitude of amusement, I suppose, realizing just as you look at your dog, and you know, if you try to explain to your dog how to drive your car, your dog will respond with the same attitude that many of us have when higher truths, fourth dimensional soul truths are shared with us. We have that same kind of limited consciousness. Being a human being is perfectly fine until it isn't anymore. Until you've become root bound, until you've gotten to the point where you're ready, your soul in evolution is ready to take a leap. You're ready to take the quantum leap, moving from the literal third dimensional consciousness into the fourth dimensional consciousness. In physics, the analogy is moving from, the regular physics of Einstein into the quantum physics that is fourth dimensional, that has a completely different way of looking at things and operates by different rules. And the same thing is true for you. You're operating by different rules to the extent that you move into your fourth dimensional consciousness, which doesn't happen all at once, by the way. It's a gradual, step-by-step process. And it happens, you're unfolding through the third dimension into your fourth dimensional consciousness. Your consciousness is moving, and this fourth dimensional consciousness is pushing out through the third dimensional consciousness. Now, Jane, in the video we're going to watch, talks about turning to page 19 in the Spiritual Power Tools book. And in that book, there's a listing of the differences between the third dimensional consciousness and the fourth dimensional consciousness. A few weeks from now, we're going to have a lesson on the fourth dimensional consciousness. But before we can really address that, we have to understand what it's like to move out of the third dimension. I toyed with the idea of calling this lesson How to Lose Your Mind, because it's about losing your limited, concrete ego mind. That's another analogy or another synonym for this third dimensional consciousness. It's your limited mind, the mind that goes around in the squirrel cage, that thinks on this side of the issue, then that side of the issue, and then can't make up its mind either way, and then goes back to the other side. That is what we're talking about here today, how to lose your limited mind. And then what do you get? Well, it reveals itself over time. And what you get when you let go of your limited mind is a higher consciousness. You could say a higher mind, the intuition that is greater than the intellect, the intuition that is a higher dimension of being. Jane says in the video that she was shocked when in her meditation and her inner study, she didn't have a teacher in the outer world. She really wasn't finding any books that were teaching her about what she was experiencing. And then all of a sudden, she's awakening to the fact that there's a higher dimension of being. Do you know there's a higher dimension of being? I don't mean think it, I mean know it. It begins to reveal itself to you and unveil itself through you as you begin to align yourself with it. So before we can understand the fourth dimensional ocean, we have to understand the third dimensional iceberg. Before we can move into the higher consciousness, we have to master the lower consciousness. And this is the process of becoming enlightened. This is something that's revealing itself to you over time. This is a journey of self-discovery, of unveiling. And your fourth dimensional consciousness works its way out through your experience of the third dimension. Your higher mind, your higher consciousness, works itself out through your lower consciousness, your lower mind, as a gradual step-by-step process of self-mastery. The value of this journey reveals itself to you as you go through these steps and these stages. And you begin to notice the difference. Wait a minute, I'm in this stuck consciousness here. And after a while, you start saying to yourself, this doesn't feel good. It feels limited. I don't like this. This happens to me frequently. I'll be riding my bicycle and I'll see somebody with a political thing that's, oh boy, some kind of, I'm not going to get into all the stuff, but some of the stuff that people where I live, and I live in the South, have on their front lawns, and I react to it, and then I think that doesn't feel good. That feeling I have, it doesn't mean I have to agree with whatever I see, but it's that ego within me that wants to get into the opposites, that wants to react. And when you're in this lower state of consciousness, this third dimensional consciousness, after a while, as you evolve and grow, it just isn't comfortable anymore. That limited consciousness of the intellect doesn't serve you and doesn't work for you anymore. You can't get answers from it anymore. You can't think your way out of these problems anymore. You can't figure your way out through life. Life, and look at the world around you, is baffling. Life doesn't make any sense. Only on the intuitive level, intuitive awareness, the higher self, the higher mind, does anything make any sense. Otherwise, you find yourself trying to solve your problems, whether it's the problems in the world out here or the problems you're having within yourself, using the same old intellectual thoughts over and over again. Now, I came into this lifetime with a highly developed intellect, and I thought my journey was going to be to develop that intellect more and more and more until I just had it going, and that was spiritual growth. And eventually I was root bound and it just wasn't working anymore. And I had to surrender and say, hey, help. And I'm really grateful that I met Jane, that I've been able to have out of body teachers and go within and experience my higher self. But I had to first realize what kind of things were keeping me stuck in my lower self. So ask yourself, what are the things that are keeping you stuck in your lower self? Habits, addictions, pastimes, habitual thinking and feeling. What kind of things are keeping you stuck in the third dimension? What kinds of things keep you going around in circles or going on detours in your spiritual growth? Jane talks about it as a merry-go-round. She says, my lower intellect has kept me on a merry-go-round in the opposites. And so this week, she challenges us in the video that we're going to watch at the end of this lesson to be in our observer selves more so that we can catch this faster, so that we can realize when we're on the squirrel cage, the merry-go-round, in the opposites, going back and forth, and asking ourselves questions like, what is my mind doing right now? What am I feeling right now? Am I stuck in past memories, regrets, or grievances? Am I stuck in future worries or fears or desires? Am I stuck in either of these opposites of the past and the future? Start to, going into your observer self this week, start to examine and identify what is keeping you stuck, stuck in the third dimensional consciousness. For me, I've realized that my observer self helps me to get out of my intellect and to do things without my intellectual thought, without distraction. And I am certainly not out of the woods yet, but I'm working on it. And I stopped being a perfectionist about it. Just do a little bit every day. When I catch myself, just be just a little more conscious, a little more self aware. Instead of multitasking and trying to distract myself and pushing down my feelings and all my stuff by trying to, do 10 things at once and being on my phone while I'm trying to fold the clothes, while I'm trying to do this, while I'm trying to do that. I just try to do one thing at a time. As I do that one thing, I experience the space of self-awareness. And when I'm with other people, I try not to think too much. It helps me to just, when I, with my breath, go, I am, with my in breath, you, with my out breath, silently. I am you. And it stills my mind. And then I can listen and beyond the words, be present with other people because, people are really communicating to us beyond their words. What they're saying is not what they're really saying, but we won't recognize that or intuit that until and unless we can quiet mind. It's trying to look for an opening so we can say something, so we can go do something and poke our nose in there and butt in and cut them off. We all do it. Instead, just listening. I am you, just being. So listen to your mind this week and see where it's taking you. And when you do this, you find something starts to emerge within you that I've heard Jane call many times clear think. Clear think means not thinking at all, but having the awareness, the intuitive awareness of your higher consciousness, your fourth dimensional consciousness, just comes through without thinking. Meditation is the best way to get into this awareness. The interesting thing about meditation is that before it gives you that experience of clear thing, it gets worse. You start to notice all the chatter, and that's exactly where you want to be, because that's what you've got to become aware of so that you can let it go. And then the observer self takes the practice of meditation and it moves it into your everyday life. That observer self is the way that you learn to turn off your mind as you live your life day by day. So these two practices work together. Meditation, which perhaps is just 5 minutes a day to start, and your mind is racing, and that's okay, because that resistance allows you to bring your mind back. Bring your mind back. It's called the bring back muscle. Just keep bringing your mind back as many times as you need to without self-judgment, without condemnation. Jane says if your mind just races around for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or however long you're meditating, you're still meditating because you're wearing that out. It's becoming thinner and thinner. And so you bring yourself back and you bring yourself back and you're diligent. So meditation is that practice that then you take into your everyday life through your practice of the observer self. You just get a little bit quieter, a little bit more in the presence, a little bit more grounded. One of the best ways I find to center myself and become quiet is to become aware of my body, which seems kind of ironic. Why would I become more aware of my body if I want to let my body go? But by becoming more aware of it, I can let it go. And same thing with my mind. By becoming more aware of your mind, you let it go over time. And you make a little bit of progress day by day. You can practice this while you're driving, just being and noticing. And every stoplight, ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? The thing here is to take charge of your mind and to stop your mind from running you. And gradually, you take dominion over your mind and you become the master of those obsessive thoughts. I had a situation a couple months ago where I was worried about somebody and I was obsessing and thinking and going around and around. And I just had to say, stop. And in this case, I had to just use my will. And every time I started to think, I just shut it off. Jane talks in the video that she pushes the stop button. Just stop. And in dealing with something like an obsessive pattern of thinking, sometimes you've got to be pretty firm with yourself. And then your intuition can kick in and give you something of value. Then you can truly get into clear think. Jane said her mind went blah, 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 blah. And she said, I was the biggest blah, blah, blah of all time. And your mind will just do this kind of thing, but it has to be corralled, she says. And I mean corralled. And it's like breaking a wild horse. It can be done, and it will be done if you use your will with patience, knowing that it's a process. So the first step of moving out of the third dimension and into the fourth dimensional consciousness, the higher awareness, is turning off your mind. And once you do that, you can begin to tap in to that fourth dimension, that fourth dimensional consciousness where everything that you need to know is available to you. We try to solve our third dimensional problems on the third dimension, and they can't be. Ultimately, we have to surrender. I tried and I tried and I tried to think my way out of things, and occasionally I'd have an answer, but ultimately, it's the fourth dimensional consciousness that provides all the answers. But first, we have to observe our minds and get out of our minds, lose our minds. One of the things that we should do when we're finding ourselves stuck in obsessive thinking is journal about it. Journaling is a good way to observe your mind. Journal and ask the question in your journaling, what was my payoff here of obsessively thinking about this? What was I getting out of this? How is it keeping me stuck? And you'll find yourself getting answers because your busy mind is addicted to drama. Your busy third dimensional mind is addicted to being stuck in the drama of catastrophizing about life or being immobilized out of fear. And that is truly an addiction like any other addiction. And to overcome it takes desire, commitment, and will. The desire to let it go, the commitment to do whatever is necessary, and the will to back up that commitment that fulfills the desire of your heart to still your mind. It has to be your strongest and firmest desire to overcome that third dimensional mind. It must become a priority for you. And as Jane goes into this clip, she tells on herself, and it ends kind of abruptly, but she talks about when she was guided to go to a party and not say anything. She doesn't talk about the story of it, but I've heard her tell it at other times, where she just was guided to only say enough to keep things going, but not to offer her opinions on anything. And she said people told her that she was the best conversationalist they ever met. And she didn't even do a conversation because they just wanted to talk. And so listening, she realized that she didn't need to keep asserting herself and imposing herself into these conversations. So the third dimension, finding out what the third dimension is and how it works is important because as you uncover the truth of your being, you first have to find out what's going on there in your third dimension and find out how limiting it is. Just as a dog or an amoeba or a lower life form is limited, so your human form of your limited mind, your ego mind, stuck in karma, stuck in the law of cause and effect, is limiting to you. This human dimension, this human consciousness is under the law of the opposites, under the law of cause and effect, the good and the bad, the right and the wrong, and you are bound to those opposites, happy and sad, and addicted to those opposites, ruled by the emotions that dwell within those opposites that operate from your subconscious mind and seem to pull you this way and that in your life. And so what you're doing by mastering your mind is getting out of that personal self of I and mine and me and possessions and what I want, my needs, my wants, my relationships, my problems, and so forth. And then what do you move into? You start to experience the qualities of your higher self. You start to realize that you can turn off your mind. You can identify with that infinite aspect of your beingness. You begin to realize that happiness is not found in the outside world. That's where the addictive third dimensional mind tells you it is. But it's only found here and it's totally unconditional. Happiness has nothing to do with whether you won the lottery, whether you got what you wanted or what the weather is. Happiness is an internal experience. And so you're empowered because you're not powerless anymore. You're not the victim of circumstances. Another word for this higher awareness is the now moment. And we've heard a lot about the now, being in the now moment. So you're not stuck in the past or dreading, worrying, or desiring something in the future. You're not regretting or resenting things in the past or nostalgic for things in the past. You're in the now moment. And you move out of those emotional states that keep you bound into a clear thing, a higher space where there's some spaciousness, where there's some breathing room, where you begin to function in such a way that you have some flexibility, some actual choice in life. not living in fear, not feeling separate and alone in that third dimensional consciousness, and starting to become willing and aware of the possibilities of change. Change is how we move from the third dimension to the fourth dimension. We've had a couple of weeks now, we've talked about change, and change is really embracing change, is really the way that we move out of this third dimensional consciousness. No longer identifying with that limited self and being willing to move into that higher awareness. And the way we do this is by letting go of our personal mind and moving into the silence. Your higher awareness is the silence of your being. And as you move into your higher awareness, you're no longer afraid of silence. You start to embrace quiet. It's always there. It's as if it's humming in the background, that quiet of that higher part of your being. So the first step in moving out of your third dimension into your fourth dimensional consciousness is to watch your thoughts and notice how redundant and repetitive they are and how useless that mind chatter is. And once you realize and you get this concept down, you begin to understand that you need to turn off those thoughts. By just being aware of them, you're letting them go. And so your observer self is this important part of you that watches over your obsessive thinking and helps you to begin to stop those thoughts. So as this week goes on, take a little time every day to notice what's going on in your mind and notice how your mind is pulling you this way and that way, and how your mind is keeping you stuck in habitual thinking, and how it actually immobilizes you and keeps you from taking action, or it causes you to emotionally react to things and so impulsively do things that are not in the best interest of your soul. And then you can begin to stop these thoughts midstream. You can just stop them, just saying stop or no, and just let it be. Moves you into that silence that moves you out of that world of the opposites that keeps you stuck in happiness and sadness and safe and then anxious and all of these different, you feel wonderful and then you feel terrible. All of these things feel like that because they're under the law of the opposites, the law of reincarnation and karma. They keep you on the karmic wheel. And ultimately, enlightenment moves you off that wheel, moves you into that space of oneness, which is your true inheritance. So this week, use your observer self to notice how the opposites run you all day long. And notice that your ego is that aspect of your being that operates through your personal mind. And ask yourself and journal out questions as you every day do a little journaling on your self-reflection, your self-awareness. Ask yourself, what is it that I need to let go of in the third dimension that's keeping me stuck there? And how would releasing this help me to move forward into my higher awareness, into my infinite self? That this takes a strong commitment and a desire to move out of the third dimension. Well, let's watch this video together and see what signposts we can see on the journey to our fourth dimensional selves by mastering the third dimension.
Well, hi there. As you can see, I have my Spiritual Power Tool book here. And I hope that you have yours handy because we're going to page 17. So, as I was talking to you last week about the third and fourth dimension, I want to tell you first of all, before I go into a lot of detail about these different dimensions, I was shocked, to say the least, when I realized that there was another dimension. to this world that I lived in, that there was a higher dimension. And I thought about it a lot when I first started delving into a little bit of it, to understand what is the difference between the third and the fourth. And I didn't quite understand at the time what the difference was. So as I worked in it, as I became more familiar, and what I'm going to be sharing with you right now didn't happen overnight. It probably took several years or more, probably 5 years, to get the whole vision of the difference between the third and the fourth, and to practice it and to be part of it. So when I talk to you about this, I want you to understand that this in itself is a journey. It isn't an overnight deal, and you will work on each one of these little steps I'm going to talk about over and over again. But it will pay dividends beyond whatever I could even mention to you. Only when you master this will you be able to truly understand what it is to be in the higher dimension. It's the difference between living in a limited state of consciousness to a higher state of awareness. So as you can see, the third dimensional consciousness, and you recognize yourself here. It's pretty simple. And one of the things that I found out as I was working with myself was that I was unable to turn off my mind. My mind went crazy on me. And I know your mind goes crazy on you because this is human. This is the humanhood. So the things that I'm going to talk about, the third dimension, is part of being human. And everybody that you meet and everybody that you talk to, your children, your people that you work with, your boss, whoever, lives in this third dimension that I am going to be discussing, which is they cannot turn off their mind. It's very hard for anyone, even especially when you're trying to meditate. But if you just watch your mind, I was appalled when I started to realize how busy my mind was thinking about Zippo nothing, or recreating the same old problem I was thinking about 2 weeks ago, or the conversation I had with Mary Jo, and what she said to me and what I said to her. And it wasn't going anyplace. It wasn't doing anything. It just kept me on a merry-go-round. So I was on this merry-go-round of my mind. I would think of one thing, and then I would think of another thing about the same subject. And I would go around and around and around and around. Now, I want you to pay attention to your mind this week. I want you to really look into what is your mind doing? How does it work within your head? How often do you ever have a quiet moment in your head when you're driving, when you're going to the store, when you're listening to others? You're also thinking while they're talking to you how you're going to answer the question they're asking. You see? But when I began the process, and it was a process of listening to my mind and paying attention to where it was taking me and how busy it was doing absolutely zippo nothing. Every once in a while I'd come up with a good idea, but not very often. And if I did come up with a good idea, I spent the next 3 days trying to think of it and wonder if it's really good or not. No clear thinking. I was in this merry-go-round. And particularly when I began meditating, it even got worse. And then I really began to understand the importance of the observer self. Now I've talked to you for years about the observer self and the importance of developing it. Because if you don't develop that observer self, you're not going to be able to turn off your mind. Because there'll be nothing to observe it. Do you follow what I'm saying here? You have to work on that. You have to be diligent. And you have to watch every little thought you're thinking and cut yourself off at the pass. In other words, what I'm saying is, when you see you're thinking over the same thing that you thought about 2 seconds ago and putting a different spin on it, you have to take charge of it and stop it. You're not going to get any real solution to the problem you're thinking about or the whatever is going through your head. You see, everybody is like this. This is the third dimension. This is the humanhood. Do I want to say the third dimension? I could just say humanhood. This is way the human person. And then, as you discover all that's going on in your head and you say, no, I'm stopping it right now. I'm not going to let that rule my day. I'm not going to let that thought be what I live in, because I can't make any decisions because I'm thinking about, oh, wonder if this, wonder if that. Oh, if I do this, what will happen? If I do that, what will happen? Will he be mad? Will she be mad? Will my boss like me anymore if I told him what I thought? Blah, 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 blah. I found out I was the biggest blah, blah in town. I blah, blahed myself all over the place, and I bet you do too. This mind of ours has to be corralled, and I mean corralled. First step to move into the higher dimension of self is corralling that mind. Because in the fourth dimension, if you will do your work, you will have mastered the art of turning off your mind. You will have mastered it. It will be a mastering for you. And then, once you get that mastering of that mind, then you have an opportunity to really get into clear thinking and tap into the other dimension, the fourth dimension, where everything that you need to know is available to you. And once that started happening for me, wow, I really started listening to that mind of mine and observing it and getting out of it. So you have to do it. I can't do it. God doesn't do it. You do it. You have to be diligent in watching what the mind does. But first, spend a couple of days just listening to yourself. Journaling about, wow, I must have solved that problem 27 different ways, and man, did it keep me stuck. And what was my payoff? Oh, I know what my payoff was. I didn't have to do anything. Because if I keep that mind busy, I don't have to take action. I don't have to do anything. So I really love my busy mind. And my busy mind, it goes into all kinds of drama. Oh my God. It imagines all kinds of terrible things or wonderful things that could happen to me. And yet, here I sit, not making any decisions, not being able to move forward or backwards or upside down. It is your will, and it has to be your desire to conquer this, because only you're going to do it. And believe me, this has to be one of your first priorities to move out of the third dimension. Because humanhood thinks all the time. You know when you're sitting with a group of people and everybody is talking in the group and nobody's listening to anybody. Observe next time you're in a meeting or next time you're with a group of people having lunch or dinner or supper or whatever. Watch what's going on. Sit back and watch what's happening. And believe me, they will not know that you didn't say a word. That was my biggest shock. I practiced that. I sat and didn't say a word. I just sat there. And nobody knew I didn't say anything. They were so busy talking, yakking about this, that, and the next thing, cutting each other off, trying to get the floor. That was amazing to me. I had never observed that because I was always part of the action. And I realized whatever I was saying wasn't being listened to anyhow. That made it much easier to shut up and not be a participant in nothingness. Because believe me, it was nothingness. Opinions, nothingness.
So this week, we're going to start watching those opinions, that nothingness, that blah, blah that goes on in our minds. And we're going to begin to notice how that third dimension, that human self, that lower self, is operating in the realm of the opposites, the happy, the sad, the good, the bad, and how to move out of that third dimensional consciousness by stilling our minds and moving into the silence. And we want to support you in doing this very thing. On Thursday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern, we've got a question and answer support group, and we all support each other in our journey. And you can speak or just be silent. You can participate. You can ask questions. You can share your experiences or just observe. But we want you to be there, 7 p.m. Eastern. The link is found in your chat room or on the website. Also, there's a donation link in your chat room and also on the website to support the Center for Enlightenment as this work is done in support of all of humanity. And so as you watch your lower mind, as you watch your ego mind, your third dimensional self, start noticing this week the patterns that emerge there. And next week, we're going to take this deeper. And until then, bye for now.